Okay. Today, my guest is Professor Marjorie Lyles. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with her. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Marjorie as a person. Professor Lyles is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally, as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I will skip many of her accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Marjorie is a fellow of the AIB and SMS, and also was the past president of both AIB and SMS. She's an area editor for JIBS and has served on the editorial boards of AMR, AMJ, SMJ, and Journal of Management. As an expert on China, she has been invited as a scholar and as a consultant to the US Department of Commerce. She has consulted with government agencies and firms in knowledge management, IJVs, and higher education. For instance, she has consulted with USAID in Indonesia, USIA in Hungary and Malaysia, and UNDP in the development of Technology Park in Malaysia. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. This is quite an honor to be chosen to do one of these videos for the AIB library.
Thanks. So let's start with the personal side of things. What did you want to become when you were a child?
Well, one of the things that I said I wanted to do was that we had moved around a lot, and for a while we were living in Los Angeles. And when we were living in Los Angeles, my goal in life was to become a beach warmer. Because in LA, the beaches in the morning are very cold, and so people are very cold if they go early in the morning. So I would volunteer to warm up.
Funny. So what's the earliest moment of awareness between foreign and international for you?
My parents were immigrants, as my grandparents came from Russia. And early on, I was aware of the difference between us Americans and my family, because my grandparents didn't speak English. I couldn't talk to them, and when they came to the house, I didn't know what they were saying or anything like that. And so from a very, very early age, I was aware of the difference between people who are immigrants and speaking other languages and domestic English.
Interesting. So how or why did you choose IB as a field?
I chose IB because I really enjoyed traveling for one reason, as a child and as a scholar. And whoops, are you still there?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that.
That's
anyway, my dissertation at the University of Pittsburgh was about CEOs' ability to identify and formulate the problems that they were facing. And overwhelmingly, the CEOs at that time, which was in the 1970s, the major issue they brought up for them was internationalization and internationalizing their companies. And I had thought of myself as a strategy person, strategic management, even though that was not a field at that time.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to have attended the Dan Schindel and Hoffer conference that was held at the University of Pittsburgh, and I think that was about 1977. And it was really the kickoff for the discipline of strategic management and SMS and SMJ were all based on that conference's, the results of that conference. And so at the time I thought this was the field that I really wanted to be in. But then after doing my dissertation, I also found out that IB was very important to most businesses. And it was something that I needed to teach myself more about it. And so I made a very bold mistake, someone might call it a mistake, to accept an invitation to spend a year at INSEAD. And my goal was to learn more about international business while I was there and hear what the faculty were teaching and what I could gain from that to add to my own skills and knowledge.
So let's off script a little bit. Who is most or a lot, who has a lot of influence over your career at the early stages, 1970s, early 1980s? Who's the most influential person?
The person. I'm going to turn that around again a little bit with a little bit more explanation. I went to undergraduate at Carnegie-Mellon, which at that time was Carnegie Institute of Technology. And that's when Cyrus and Marsh and Cyrus and the third one were working on what was known as the Carnegie School, which really was coming up with behavioral theories of organizations. And that's really where, from the American side, was the beginning of work on organizational learning. And so when I was in the doctoral program, my dissertation was kind of building on that premise. And my mentor was Ian Mitroff. And Ian was on the School of Business faculty. He was on the philosophy department, and he was also teaching in information systems. And my minor was information systems, and I just really liked his perspective. And so we went in that direction.
Perfect. Something that's not on your CV, something interesting.
Something interesting. I guess I was the first Ph.D., woman Ph.D. at the University of Pittsburgh, ever.
Really? Wow. Interesting.
And I have been very lucky to be, with my choices of being at Indiana University early on, who had a strong emphasis on international business. And also a very diverse faculty population at Pittsburgh who were also very interested in international, that I had made contacts of being in the right place at the right time. And so what people may not know is that my work in China started in 1984, and I was in, as you mentioned, the U.S. Department Commerce and Dalian program. And after Tiananmen Square, I was one of the people in the first U.S. government delegation to go in after Tiananmen Square.
Wow.
I was in Budapest in front of the Parliament building when Hungary declared independence from Russia. And that was while I was on the faculty at IU. Um, I was in Hanoi on the day that the U.S. embargo was listed, and the Vietnamese were running, bicycling all over Hanoi. There weren't many cars at that time in Hanoi. They all rode bicycles, and they were all yelling, "USA, USA." And so that was really great. And this conference that I mentioned that was held at Pittsburgh in 1977, I was one of 2 doctoral students who sat through that conference.
Oh.
So I've had luck to be in unusual places at the right times.
Luck favors the fortunate. Okay, if you stop doing what you're doing today, if you were not an academic, what would you rather do? What is the second best career path?
I probably would have been a business person. I was in schools at time where there weren't many women. So when I graduated from CMU, my advisor told me that I should be a teacher or maybe a secretary or something along those, a librarian. And but I wanted to go for an MBA, and my advisor there discouraged me from doing that, which a couple of years later, I applied for the MBA program at Pitt, and one of the faculty encouraged me to go into the doctoral program.
Final question in this segment about regrets. What is the one thing you wish you would have done that you didn't?
In my schooling, I had to take languages, foreign languages, and I was absolutely horrible. I have no mouth-ear coordination at all. I don't remember words that I have no connection with. And so for someone who likes to say they're an international business professor, I only speak English, but I'm very good at reading the menus in various countries.
Perfect. Okay, about research now. How do you summarize your research to laymen? How do you explain what you did, how important it is to people who don't really read your work regularly?
I try to explain what organizational learning is and put it in the context in which I am. But quite frankly, I find it very hard to explain to a non-academic what my area is.
In IB research, what are the things that we have omitted, or what are the variables that we have underemphasized so far?
I think there's a lot that can be studied in the future. More of the interactions between the firms. These take much deeper looks into what is actually going on, not just easy variables. And also the what we would call informal institutions, how the informal institutions translate across countries and people working with other people from other areas of the world. Organizational learning is highly omitted, and its importance for flexibility, creativity, and innovation is really not recognized as much as it should be.
And now, on the other side of the coin, what have you overemphasized and maybe did too much?
Since I'm now
Without
retired,
naming.
I can say what I think. I think economic theories have been too heavily emphasized within IB. The economic theories are based on assumptions and choosing variables that are easy to measure and that don't really necessarily get into some of the behavioral um, theories that would be also very interesting.
What do you see as the next 5 to 10 years of the field as far as research? Where is the field going?
I've just been working with Mike Hitt and Irene Duhame on a book for Oxford University Press. And we've been looking at, we have chapters written by experts in various areas. And one of the things that we've done is have them, each chapter has 50% looking forward in terms of future research in the particular areas. And one of the areas that seems to be very exciting is the one of artificial intelligence. And what a wide, sweeping process can be put into computers and into people who can understand how to write the artificial intelligence programs. So I think that's really going to be one of the major things coming up.
Yeah, in the Mike Hitt interview, the audience might remember, artificial intelligence, rhetoric analysis, sentiment analysis came up. We talked to Divini. Divini also mentioned the same angle. True. So, I mean, you're talking about an evolution over time. I'm really curious about if this evolution is fruitful. What have we lost? What have we gained along the way? What's the state of the field? Not as only for research, but are we talking to the right people the right way? How do they view us?
I guess it depends on the study, right? Whether they can get access to the right people. But I think it is interesting. And it's interesting, you know, if we look at China and the evolution that has gone on in the society, and yet there still are informal institutions, the norms and the values of people that attract the overseas Chinese to go and invest in what was their family hometown and province. And they find that there's a lot of ways that they can fit in with the commercial culture of China, even though it may be 70 years ago that their families left. And so I think evolution is really important because people might think that it has changed entirely, but then some of the communities that people are in, the values and the norms continue to exist. Mm-hmm. And then they change again. I mean, there have been many of the Chinese authors who have become very Chinese academics who are authors who have become very competent at speaking English and writing for our top journals. And the evolution of what's happened with the Chinese market is kind of interesting, going from the times when the books were all burned and people weren't allowed to have their own private businesses, and the intelligentsia were put on farms and then moved in during the later people, Deng Xiaoping, trying to free up the Chinese market. And what we're seeing now is more influence in the Chinese business environment. So evolution is happening all the time, and it is interesting. I don't know if we have learned a lot about it because it keeps on changing. And that's changing now with what's happening with the pandemic here.
Sure. I would like to talk about creativity and curiosity, intellectual curiosity. What does your mind think of when it wanders freely in a state of idle curiosity?
That's a good question. I wish I knew.
Yeah, we wrote a paper on it with Aslı. So I think it is an interesting topic, idle curiosity. For instance, let me give you an example. Jay Barney gives an example. When he was a student at Yale, he would go to the Yale library, wander around the stacks, the books, and he would just pick a book and read randomly. And it would inform some part of his mind, the cognition. I'm curious, where do these great ideas, great papers, great creative juices come from?
I think it works differently for different people. I feel that I'm very good at sensing what's going on. And it's not that I've collected a lot of data. As a child, I spent a lot of time with my dad, who worked very hard and at times worked for, he was in the retail industry. And as a child, I would spend time with him in the store when he had his own stores. Well, actually, even when he worked for big retailers, I would often hang around. And I found out later on I could walk into a retail store and just feel, determine how they were doing just by walking around and looking at it. I could get a very good sense of how they were performing. And I think that for some people, they have big picture walking around and big pictures of things. And other people can really, when they're just wandering around with their minds, be also very detailed oriented. And I'm not that detailed oriented, but I feel that I've been able to do things that have helped me.
Interesting.
But I don't write them down, and that's a big problem. I mean, I think people who can think of things with their mind wandering around and then remember them enough to write them down. I've heard of many people who wake up from a dream and have a piece of paper next to themselves and they write it down. I've never done that, and I wish I had.
I learned it 10 years ago. Now with a pencil and a book, basically, I'm taking notes religiously. I'm hoping it will hopefully pan out someday. We'll see. Final segment about advice and mentoring. What do you wish you had known when you were starting out your career?
I guess when I started out my career, I really didn't know much about what an academic was. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is that finding your community within the academic setting is really important. And that means that my advice would be to young academics is start going to the professional organizations. Even if they're offline now, get on there and listen to people talking. Try to find people who are doing work in areas that are similar to yours. Get a little bit of background about them and then start a conversation with them. Do not be shy. You have to kind of jump in and kind of say, hey, I read your paper, blah, 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 and I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about it. And I'm working in this area, and I think it has an overlap with what you're doing. And these people that you meet at the professional meetings are very important to your career. I found co-authors there. I found people who will read my papers before I send them out to journals. I ask to read their papers and I can find out what the latest research is going on. And I think that is really important. One of the things, as well as we don't really think much about it, is staying in touch. And again, this is part of your academic community with your mentors, your former faculty, the students who were in the doctoral program with you. I stay in touch with some of the people who are in my doctoral consortia.
It's a cohort, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And, I see them maybe not every year, but maybe every second year or every third year. And we stop and talk and find out what each other is doing. And this kind of professional community is very important. And so that's one of the things. The other thing that I think is really important for advice for people in the IB field is that they really need to help to improve the IB importance at their institutions. What we've seen lately is that many business schools have done away with their IB departments, which means that the number of IB faculty have decreased. And that means that other departments can outvote on issues that the faculty get to vote on, like the list of A journals, and that journals like JIBS, even though it has a very, very high impact factor, has trouble being on the A list for many schools because the other faculties vote against it. And I think it's up to the IB faculty to help try to strengthen the presence of IB. I mean, the world is international now. This should be on everybody's plate. And AACSB needs to be confronted when they say that anyone can teach IB or IB section a course, and that counts as IB on their list. Deans need to be convinced that this is a good area for them to be in, and their reputations can be positively improved by having stronger IB departments. one warning with this is don't just come in complaining. Come in and use that creativity. Go back to your mind wandering and try to think of ways how these issues can be solved. And I think this is a critical issue for people in IB.
Well, that's, I want to end normally on a positive note, but this is a huge issue that we need to talk about clearly. How to strengthen the positioning of the IB department's existence in the school. How do you suggest going about it? Where does it happen?
Well, I don't know if this influenced my school, but I had 2 NSF grants. Actually, as you mentioned, I worked for a number of grants from international organizations, and it brought money into the school. And I think that talks to some faculty who recognize how hard that is to get, but it also should be recognized by the deans and the university in general that faculty are bringing money into the school and or bringing in students, foreign students into their programming.
I'm writing the grant application now. Writing the grant application is more difficult than publishing any papers in JIBS, AMJ, AMR. I think I'm aging, aging by the time. And congratulations, getting 2 is next to impossible in the field. A great accomplishment.
I was lucky, yes.
What is one question that I should have asked you but didn't?
Well, what am I doing now?
What are you doing now?
Well, you know, one of the things that I think people should do as well is think about what they want to do in the future. You know, where do you want to be in 5 years? And what do you have to do to get there? I retired. And I find I'm working as hard as I did when I was getting paid. And so I think that it's just amazing, and particularly at AIB, how many senior scholars, many of whom have retired, are still involved in the association and still want to have that academic community that they're part of. And many of these people are rich in knowledge about how to get papers published, or, you know, still reading the journals. I'm still on the editorial board as a, I forget what kind of editor I am, but maybe an area editor. And so I'm reading manuscripts all the time. I'm on a special issue as one of the editors for it. So I think there's a lot of people such as myself who are retired, but who are still very active and giving back to the field of IB, and are people who are welcome to take on a debate or some other thing that helps them keep their minds active.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. This was splendid. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.